2020 was an incredibly rough year for CG Sports. We lost major orgs, had 4 major leagues with 4 different formats, a tightly packed schedule, and an even longer off-season than usual, and that's without even factoring in the pandemic, which meant we couldn't have LAN events, and it cast a massive shadow over the whole operation. It was already going to be a pretty wacky year before the season began in June, and things were already going downhill by that point, but hopefully now is where we can begin to normalize everything again. On Sunday, Ubisoft announced some sweeping changes to the CG Sports landscape, and even a tentative rescheduling of the Six Invitational to May instead of February. So if you haven't kept up with the modifications to the system, here's one big general summary. The single biggest change is now using a standard format. All major regional leagues last year were completely different. North America was double GSL style best of 3s with a mid-stage reset. Europe was a single round robin best of 1 with no overtime. APAC North was Swiss with a mid-stage reset. Brazil had best of 2s. It was different everywhere. But now all leagues are shifting to the same format. Single round robin best of 1 matches with overtime. Yeah. Every region is now the same. Seeing best of 3s in North America as one example was really cool, but I also understand why people got frustrated with it. In this way, every region goes back to a normal scoring system, and every team plays on every play day and are guaranteed to play every other team in their region, rather than sometimes sitting out or playing the same teams over and over again. TSM OXG! Jacob, wasn't this exactly how ESL did it with Pro League before? Sort of, but not quite. We had to contend with draws before, but now we have no possibility of ties, and we have an update to the way that scoring works on a global scale. Winning is worth 3 points, like it usually has been. Winning in overtime is worth 2 points, losing in overtime is worth 1 point, and losing in regulation is worth as many points as Fabian went to majors last year. That just makes me sad. Also, why did I just burn Fabian? The complaint we've been hearing about draws in pro play has finally been silenced. And again, as much as I like best of 3s or Swiss formats, this ultimately does seem like the best way forward. It just sucks that it took 6 months of wacky formats for us to realize that. Also, with the 2020 season, we now get all 3 stages as opposed to just the 2 that we had last year. We're going back to 1 play day per region per week, rather than super weeks of 2 region play days per week. Now, Mondays are Europe, Wednesdays are North America and APAC North, Thursdays are APAC South and South America, which also has a second play day on Fridays, and Saturdays and Sundays are for Brazil and Mexico. Way fucking simpler. The one exception to this schedule is the final week of each stage, which sees several play days per region per week in one big super week leading into the crescendo of the stage, which means that it's 7 weeks long and not 9 or 10 depending on how many teams are in each league. That way everyone starts and stops their league play at the same time so it can line up for majors and the Invitational. And speaking of the Invitational, it has been rescheduled to May, where we would have had our major for stage 1. The idea is that the world manages to get COVID-19 under control enough to justify having an international LAN again, rather than Ubisoft just canceling it outright. And if it keeps up the trend we're currently on, by May, I certainly hope we're in a much better place. All 20 teams that qualified originally will still retain their spots. However, there's no guarantee that teams will opt to have the same players on their roster when May rolls around. The transfer window is open again and teams can make changes as they like, but Ubisoft is mandating if any player that qualified is no longer playing for an invitational team, they still must receive a portion of their old team's SI prize money as compensation. A prime example of this would actually be Hot and Cold after he was released from Dark Zero yesterday. Dark Zero will still be paying him a portion of their SI prize winnings, even though now NJR is playing on the team in his place. Also, by the way, NJR is on Dark Zero. You see how I fit that one in there? God, that was prime! So the World Championship gets rescheduled to May, but we were supposed to have a May major, so what happens to that? We are still using the global standings point system from last year, which honestly I was a really big fan of, but to compensate for not having a major, the top 8 teams from every region will be receiving additional points based upon their placements in stage 1, and the top 4 teams will also earn additional prize money as if they had positioned there during the 6 major that's not happening anymore. For one example is if SSG placed 3rd in the major, then they'd receive about $18,000, but for stage 1, if they place 3rd just in that stage, then they will also receive the placement bonus because the major is not happening. This way, teams are motivated to still perform well in stage 1 and not blow it off as though it means nothing. The Invitational in 2022 is still happening in Montreal in February, and the esports team is confident that global majors can in fact come back before the year is over. I really hope that can happen because there are some people that I need to slap across the face that I haven't been able to see for a year. Also, bear in mind that Stage 1 will be compressed into 5 weeks rather than 7 because of the Invitational. So Stage 1 will look a lot like the stages from last year did, but once Stage 2 of this season begins, that is where we will settle into that 7 weeks and things will begin to look as normal. Also, there's a couple of new things that were announced on Sunday as well. Siege now has a pause function in-game for online matches, which means coaches will get tactical timeouts starting this year, and it isn't just exclusive to LANs. Teams now also have the ability to field 2 different rosters at the same time, one for regional play and one for national play. For example, Virtus.pro could pick up a second team to compete under their banner for the Russian Major League while also retaining their team and staff for the European League at the exact same time. You can get a coach for the national team, and roster lock rules will also apply to them, which means we might finally be seeing academy teams make their way to Siege. I don't think enough people are freaking out about this. This is honestly very cool. But don't freak out yet. I still want to see how everything is implemented first and how teams decide to take advantage of these new features. That is most of the big points from the update on Sunday, and I know it's probably a lot to take in, but I'm hoping that this remains the consistent format for the next year, if not more, and everyone can begin to settle into a rhythm, understanding how everything works without constant explainers for changes every couple of months. Yes, the esports landscape is continuously evolving, but you need to be able to settle into something more consistent as time goes on, and based on how things were handled in 2020, it kind of left the Siege scene taking a bit of a downward slide. This looks like a rebuilding effort, but we still have to work around a pandemic to make everything worthwhile. This is the right time for changes like this, but if I'm honest, I really hope it's the last time. That's all from me. There are a lot more things happening with North America and Europe in terms of roster changes over the next couple of weeks, so yet again, please hit up my Twitter, my Twitch, and this YouTube channel for more in the coming days while we go over most of that as it happens. And I'm really hoping that Disrupt knows what it's doing while not having 2 teams to... peace.